In this video, we are going to talk about 10 Excel functions that are very useful on a daily basis and also to automate tasks and save time. Let's start with the first function, that is the sum. So let's say I have something to adapt. I can use the sum function to help me. There's other ways to adapt values in Excel. That is using the equal sign and then input the first number, let's say 10, add to another number that you want to sum up, let's say 20 plus 30 plus 40 and on and on. And then I can hit enter. I'm gonna have the correct result. But let's say now I want to adapt all the values that I have here within the quantity column. I can use all those numbers, equal sign, manually input them within this formula. 70, 101, add to 539, add to 537, and on and on. But as we can see, if I continue to do it manually, it's going to take a long time to complete this task. So instead of manually inputting the numbers, I can use the sum function to help me adapt all the values within a range. So let's say equal sign, or let me input here the total quantity sold. Equal sign, sum function, double click in this function, 1, 2 to select. And then I can select all the range where I want to apply this addition, this math. And then I can hit enter and I'm done. That's it. So the total quantity sold is equal to roughly $6,500. So this is how we can adapt values in Excel. Another thing that we can adapt here are the sales. Equal sign, sum function, double click, 1, 2. And in the same way, I can basically select the entire range where I want to adapt the values. And doesn't matter if you just select a range that is larger than the data set or you have blank cells, because it's not going to change the result. Excel is going to adapt the values, the cells where there is values. If there is anything within the cell, it's not going to change the result. Let me hit enter. Let me increase the width of this column and okay, this is the total sold for all the sales that I have. Now let's move on to another function that is very, very important too. That is the SUMIF function. But different than the sum function, the SUMIF can adapt values that match with a certain criteria. So let's say I have a sales report with informations such as the month, the product, the quantity, and the sales. Right now, I want to know what is, let's say, the total sold for March, this specific month. So I don't want to adapt all the sales for all the months for the entire data set that I have. But I just want to include here the March. So how can I do it? I can use the SUMIF function to help me. So let's say in this specific cell right here, I want to input the equal sign and then SUMIF function. Let me double click in this function to select. And the first thing that I need to start with here is with the range where I have my criteria. And in this case is this specific range underneath the month column. Let me select all the values. Okay. Now let me go back here to the top and then comma. The criteria that I want to use is March. So I can either open quotations, March, close quotations, manually input the value, or let's say I can use a cell to the left. And whenever I input here a value, doesn't matter what name I input here, the function is going to take this cell right here or the information that I have within the cell as the criteria, comma, and the sum range that I want to consider maybe can be the sales. Let me select again everything. Okay. Now let me hit enter and see what we're going to have as result. 0, because the cell that I'm using as criteria is blank. So let's fill in the cell with the March month. And I'm going to hit enter and the result is going to be automatically updated for me. 30,000 in sales happened in March. Now let me change this month to, let's say, July. Then I'm going to hit enter. As we can see, the values are automatically updated following the new criteria. So this is how we can basically use the SUMIF function to adapt values that match with a certain criteria. Now let's move on to another function that can be the average. Like we did before, we already know now how to adapt values. But let's say now we need to take the average of those values. To take the average, I can either use a formula such as equal sign, let's say, open parentheses to make Excel do this calculation first, 10, add to 20, add to 30, close parentheses, divided by 3. That is the number of numbers that I'm adding up together. And then I'm going to hit enter. So this is the average. But instead of manually inputting the numbers, I can again use the equal sign and then average function. Like we did with the sum. We can do it either with a formula or with a function that we can have through this list. Let me double click 1, 2 to select the function. Now I want to know what is the average of the sales. So I can highlight here all the sales that I have, and then I can hit enter. And this is the average, 11,000. Even though I have larger numbers, such as 38,000, and smaller numbers, such as 1,000, the average is 11,000. So basically, this is how we can use the average function in Excel. Very easy to use, but it can help us a lot on a daily basis. Another function that we can use here is the average if. And the average if, like we did with the sum and the SUMIF, here it's gonna work in the same way. We can have a certain criteria to whether or not take the average of something. Equal sign, let's say now I want to consider the products to be my criteria. We did before with the months. So let's move on now to the products, just to make something different. And now I want to know what is the average of the sales for each one of those products. Let me first of all start with typing the name of the product that I need, such as 4K monitor. Enter. Equal sign, average, if. Double click, 1, 2. The range, the first argument that I have stands for the range where I have the criteria to check whether or not the criteria match with the thing that I'm looking for. Let me highlight all those values. Okay. And then let me hit comma to move to the second argument, that is the criteria itself. Let me select the monitor or the cell to the left, comma, and now the average range where I have the values to be used in this calculation. Let me hit enter and I'm done. So this is the average sold for the monitor, $11,000. But now let me change the product to another one. Maybe I can use here smart watch and then enter. $2,050. So, okay, this is working. So this is how we can use the average if in Excel to take the average, not of everything, but the things that match with a certain criteria. Another function that is very important is the COUNTA function that can count everything that is not blank. So let's say you want to know the quantity of rows that you have within this sales report. Or in other words, you want to know the quantity of sales that you have. And to know it, you basically need to count all the rows. First sale, second sale, third sale, fourth sale, fifth sale, and on and on. But manually, it's going to take a long time to count all the rows. That way, we can use the equal sign, the COUNTA function to help us. And the COUNTA, again, it's going to count everything but the blank cells. Double click 1, 2, and I can use any column to be used in this count. So let's say I want to stick with the payment method. It doesn't mean that I always need to use this column. I can move on to another because it's going to count the same. If you have informations within the cell, it's going to count the informations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on and on. The cells that you have something within it. But let me keep with the payment method. Want to select everything, okay, and then I can hit enter. 136 rows. But something that we need to be mindful here is I don't want to include the header in this count. So how can I subtract the header of this calculation? I can basically change the range. So instead of starting with the title, I can skip the header and start with the row underneath. Or I can actually start with the header and immediately after the last parenthesis, I can use -1 to subtract 1 unit and then enter 135. And let's say now I go here to the sales report and I take a couple of cells like this and I get rid of those cells, delete. As we can see in the result right here, instead of having 135, now we have 131. So this is the new result because I just get rid of a couple of informations in the cells. Now let me undo this action Okay, and another interesting with the CountA is, let's go to the last row of this data set. And if I move the range down like this, or I'm just increasing the range, okay, whenever I update or input new rows into this range right here, all those new informations are going to be included within the CountA function, are going to be automatically updated for me. But anyway, this is how we can basically use the CountA function to count everything that has something within it. Now we can move on to another function that is also very important, that is the COUNTBLANK. It's basically the opposite of the CountA, because the COUNTBLANK can count the blanks. It's not going to count anything but the blank cells. But why should I use the COUNTBLANK function in Excel? Because let's say you have a report or you have a data set and you don't have sure enough if the data is correct. So let's say I have the same data set as before, date, transaction ID, fee, total, and payment method. However, there are some rows that are missing information, like those blank rows right here, and also this blank row right here, and there's a couple of rows below, like those ones right here, and on and on. So I don't want to leave my report like this with those blank rows. So maybe I can get rid of those blank rows. Or actually, before I get rid of the blank rows, I want to count and know the total of blank rows that there is within this sales report. In a practical way, let's say the COUNTBLANK can help us to know whether or not we have an error within the report, within the data set, if there is or not informations that are being missing. So let's do it here. Of course, we know there are some missing informations here. However, let's say you have a larger data set with 100,000 different rows. Maybe manually check those rows is not properly ideal, so you can use the COUNTBLANK to automate this check. Equals sign COUNTBLANK, double click 1, 2, and let me select everything within the total column. It doesn't matter which column you choose, because it's gonna work in the same way. Okay, so I just select the entire range within the data set, and then I can hit enter. And this is the result. Basically, I have 22 blank rows. And if I go here to the total, that is the range that I'm using, and I select a couple of cells, and I'm gonna get rid of those values, look what's gonna happen with the result. Now it's 29, because I just get rid of here, and now I have more blank cells. So this is how the COUNTBLANK function works. And another function that is very important is the COUNTIF. And at this point, we already know that the if means a certain criteria. It can add a condition to the function itself. Let's say I don't want to count all the customers that I have, but I want to know the customer that bought the most. So I can count for a specific name. So let's say I can take here Jason or Joseph, and from this name, from this criteria, I can count how many times Joseph appears in the list. So let me input the name that I need right here, and then equal sign COUNTIF. Double click 1, 2. I want to count the quantity of times that Joseph appears in the list. This is a specific name. As the range, I can either select a small range like this, or in this case, I can select the entire column, because I just want to count the cells that match with my criteria. So it doesn't matter if you select a specific range or the entire column. Comma, the criteria is going to be the name that I have to the left. Close parentheses and then enter. Okay, 11 times Joseph appears here in the list. Now let me change the name to Sarah, for example, and then enter. 13. Let me change now to maybe Paul. Let me see how many times we have. 18, and on and on. So this is how we can use the COUNTIF to count not everything, but the things that match with a certain criteria. Another function that is very interesting to use is the VLOOKUP function, and maybe is one of the most famous functions in Excel. The VLOOKUP function can look up for something and retrieve the corresponding result. In a practical way, it's look like this. So let's say I have a sales report right here with a bunch of data, and I have the order date, the salesperson name, the brand name, the product name, the price, and the cost. Everything here is blank, but I need to fill in with the correct result. And the gross profit, I need to calculate the gross profit. But to calculate the gross profit, I need to do here a math. That is, equal sign, price minus the cost. Enter. As we can see, the gross profit is not going to work that well because I don't have here the cost yet. So I need to look for the product that I have, the first one, and then in the list above, in the inventory list, I can look up for this specific product, let's say right here, and then take the cost, the corresponding value as the result. So this is how the VLOOKUP function can work. Instead of manually search for all the products that I have, protein powder, calcium, and zinc, fiber, and on, I can use the VLOOKUP to automate this task for me. Equal sign VLOOKUP function. Double click, 1, 2. The lookup value is going to be the item, the thing that I need to look for, such as probiotic, and then Jopa. The table array that I want to use needs to start from the range where I have the lookup value, that is the product name. And it also needs to include what I need to bring back as result, such as the cost. So both of those columns needs to be selected. And something very important is, because we're going to click, hold, and drag down the function to make sure we can call this formula down for all the rows that we have, it's very important to lock this range right here. Because if we did not lock this range is going to be follow along the drag down, and it's going to be moved down. So it's very important to lock the range in this specific position right here. And to do it, I'm going to press the F4 key. And as we can see, the F4 key is going to add a $sign before the column and also before the row. Actually, I also need a $sign right here in this entire range. So let me select the entire range. That is this red range right here, and then F4 key. Okay, now I have the $sign everywhere, before the column, before the row, before the column, before the row. And that's it. This is what I need. You can also input the $sign manually using the keyboard. Okay, it's going to work in the same way. Jopa, column index number. This argument right here stands for what is the column that you want to retrieve as result. The first column that I selected is the product. The second one is the cost. So I need to use the number 2 because the 2 is the second column where I have the value that I need to bring back as result. 2, Jopa, and I want to have an exact match. Double click, 1, 2, close parentheses, and then enter. Okay, I already have the first cost for the first product. And let's click at the bottom right corner of the cell, hold down like this, hold and drag down. Now, as we can see, I have the cost for all the products, and let's just check if it's correct. Let's take here protein powder, for example, 77 and 70. Protein powder is right here, and the cost is just right, 77.70. Yes. Now let me continue to bring this formula down. Click, hold, and drag at the bottom right corner. Okay, I'm done with all the costs. And as we can clearly see, it's much easier and faster than manually do this task. Equal sign, price minus cost, enter. Let me also bring this formula down, and we already done. We have now the gross profit and also the cost for all the products. Another function that is very, very important is the concatenate, because the concatenate can help us group together informations. So let's say we're going to see 2 practical examples, but in the first one I have the first name and the last name of a couple of different people here. And I want to group together all those names to have the full name. I can actually manually input the first name, space, to separate the first and the last name, and then input the last name manually. However, it's going to take a long time for sure. So we can automate using the concatenate function. Equal sign, concatenate. When you are typing the function, you can see there are 2 options, concat and concatenate. What is the difference? There's no difference at all, basically. The difference is the concatenate is an old version of the function, and the concat is the newer one. You can use either of those functions, doesn't matter. I'm going to stick with, let's say, the concatenate, the old version. But if you want to use the first one, the first option, you can do so, doesn't matter. But let me stick with the last one. 1, 2, okay. The first text that I want to group is Matthew, the name. Jopa, and the second name or the last name that I want to append to the first one is Thompson. Now I can hit enter, and I already got the names grouped together. However, as we can see, we need to separate the name with a space. Matthew space Thompson. How can I do it? Because in the concatenate function, I do not have this option I can only select the cells where I have the things that I want to group together, and that's it. But we can also use the space within one of those arguments. So let me do it again. Get rid of the function equal sign concat, the first cell, comma. Now I want to append the last name. But before we do it, I need to separate the names. So open quotations, space, close quotations, comma, the second name, and then enter. That's it. This is how we can separate the names. And if you actually need to input new informations, double click on to open the function. Let me get rid of the last parentheses, comma, and then you can continue to select cells and separate those cells with comma, like I'm doing here. And if I hit enter, I'm gonna have a large value. All those cells now are grouped together. But let me undo this action and just keep up with the task that I need to do. At the bottom right corner, click, hold, and drag down to make sure we can code this function down, and that's it. So this is how we can group informations together. But let's say now we have a different problem. I have some items in the inventory, and the informations that I have are color, size in inches, and the model. The product can be red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and on and on. And the sizes in inches can be 10, 15, 20, 10, and on, model, A, B, C, and on and on. However, instead of use three different columns to know what is the product that I'm talking about, I want to create a specific code for this product. And to create this specific identification, this ID, this code, I want to use the color, the size, and the model. Doesn't need to be in this specific order. I can maybe use first the model, and then the color, and then the size, doesn't matter. But I want to create something different, an identification. So equal sign concat or concatenate, doesn't matter, I want to use first, let's say the model, comma, append to the color, append to the size, and then enter. As we can see now, I have a specific code for this specific item. I have a identification. But let me change a bit something here. I want to separate the informations using a hyphen or the minus sign. Double click on to, or actually I think it's easier to get rid of and do all over again. Equal sign, concatenate. The first thing is the model. And then, comma, I want to use a hyphen to separate. So open quotations, hyphen, close quotations, comma. Now I want to use the color, red, comma, and to make something different, and I don't want to use again the hyphen. This time I want to use a slash, let's say a forward slash, code, forward slash, uncode, comma, the size, and close parentheses, and hit enter. Now I have a identification for my first product. If I click at the bottom right corner, hold and drag down, I can have a specific identification for all the different products that I have. So this is how we can use the concatenate function to another practical example to help us on a daily basis to save time and automate tasks. And the last but not least important function is the if function. As all the other functions that we already saw here, the if function can help us automate tasks. Here I have a list of students and all the grades for each one of the students. I have the specific tests and also the final grade, the average of those previous grades. So let's say here in the status, I want to know if the student is approved or not. And I want to consider the average that is greater than 7. So if it's 7 or greater than 7, it's because the student is approved. So let me also highlight the 7, because that way I know what I'm talking about. Equal sign if function. Double click to select. The first thing that we need to do within the if function is the logical test. And my logical test is going to be the check whether the average is greater than or not 7, let's say. So let me click here over the cell to the left, and then I want to check if this average is greater than or also equal to the number 7. Comma. And if it's true, I want to have the status equal to open quotations, approve it, close quotations. This is going to be the result if the logical test is true. Comma. Else, however, if it's not true, I want to have here open quotations, do an extra test. Okay, close quotations, close parentheses, and then I'm gonna hit enter. Approve it. Of course, because the first student has an average that is greater than or equal to 7. But if I change manually this average right here to a different number, such as 6.5, let's say, and I'm gonna hit enter, I'm gonna have a different status because now the average is a lower number than 7. Now let me get rid of the 6.5 and go back to the 9. And at the bottom right corner of the cell, click, hold, and drag down to make sure we're done. So there's only one student right here that needs to do an extra test. And if I change the criteria, instead of using 7, I can use maybe 6 and then enter. Now let me bring this formula down, click, hold, and drag down. Now everyone here is approved. And if I change again the criteria to a larger number, that is going to be more difficult to be approved, of course. And if I use maybe 8 and then enter, click, hold, and drag down, as we can see, the status is going to be automatically updated for us. Another thing that we can do here is use a cell to dynamically change all the results. So instead of manually inputting the number, let me get rid of the number 8, and I want to select the cell, this yellowish cell right here. And it's very important to also lock this reference with the F4 key for the same reasons that I explained before, to not let the cell be moved down or up or whatever, and then enter. Let me bring this formula down. And yeah, if I change the number 7, the yellowish cell, to 10, for example, none of those students are going to be approved because now the average is too much, right? So let me hit enter. As you can see, everybody here needs to do an extra test. And if I change to 6, enter, everyone is approved. If I change to 7, just one guy right here needs to do an extra test. So this is how we can use the if function to help us on a daily basis in a practical way. So those are the 10 different functions in Excel that can help us. And if you have any questions or any suggestions to the next videos, let me know, comment down below, and I see you tomorrow because every day has a new video.